In the last video of this series, we looked at the bottom 5 teams in the West, and now it's time to make our way back over to the East for some of the borderline playoff teams and lower seeds. There's quite a few interesting teams in this one, so let's get right into it. We're starting off with the Washington Wizards, who have some potential to be a good team in the East, providing a few things go right for them. They have John Wall returning from injury, and that could be huge for them if he proves to be a productive player still, which is a big question mark. But outside of that, they have a solid roster. Bradley Beal is very good, Thomas Bryant is solid, Davis Bertons is really good. They have some young guys off the bench who could prove useful if they progress well. Troy Brown Jr. is my guy. But what free agent can a team like the Wizards get to help propel them towards a playoff berth? Let's not forget the Wizards have another lottery pick, which could be traded for someone, or they could get someone who is ready to contribute right away in this year's draft. There's plenty of those types of guys. I know it may seem like a cop-out, but I truly believe this is the best thing the Wizards can do in this free agency, and that's re-sign Davis Bertons. Bertons was great this year, shooting 42% on almost 9 threes a game. And next to somebody like John Wall, that's fantastic. If John Wall is anything like he was, that will be 3 guys the defense has to pay very close attention to, which will definitely make things easier on Beal. Whether Bertons keeps his production up or improves or not is up for debate. We've seen plenty of guys play great on a contract year and then fall back down to earth once they get their payday. But we can only hope that that's not the case with this one, because somebody who can shoot as well as Bertons can is very valuable to every single team. But enough about the Wizards. We're talking about the Hornets now, who were one of the great surprises last season. Many expected them to be one of the worst teams in the league, including myself, but they ended up only a few games outside of the playoffs, and a lot of that is due to the emergence of Devontae Graham. I was upset when my Hawks traded him on draft night a couple years ago, but it's whatever. They're one of the few teams who still have cap space this offseason, and so things could get very interesting with them. As for a signing I think they should make, I think Serge Ibaka would be a great fit for this team. His defense and outside shot can prove very useful for this team, who otherwise lacks any type of inside defense. With Devontae Graham, their lottery pick, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, and Serge Ibaka, that offense could be something fierce. If they grab another defensive wing and their young guys make some progression, I think this could definitely be a team in contention for that 8th seed spot. With everybody supposedly being healthy next year, I think the first 7 seeds are taken, which is crazy to think about, honestly. But yeah, their future is looking pretty good despite what we all thought when Kemba left. Next up are the Orlando Magic, aka the perennial 8th seed. They desperately need guard play, and while Fultz is good, they still need more. Nobody outside of Fournier or Fultz can create their own shot, and they have a million centers, none of which are really that good. So what in the world can these guys do being $10 million over the cap? Well, they still have a mid-level exception, and since they need a scorer, why don't they go after Brandon Knight? Yeah, I know. He hasn't been that good, he hasn't been healthy, but why not do the same thing you did with Fultz? Maybe you can prove useful and score 15 points a game or something. Considering offense is their real problem, I don't see why it wouldn't be worth taking a shot on a guy like this, considering they can't afford any other of the offensive guards on the market. It's, low risk, high reward, I guess. But now we're on to some contenders, or they're supposed to be contenders. First up in that group are the Brooklyn Nets, who are one of the most interesting teams in the NBA. They recently signed KD and Kyrie, as I'm sure you're aware of, and they have a couple pieces outside of them like Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Jared Allen. Now, this is a pretty solid team and very expensive one at that. These guys are at $140 million. So in terms of free agents, we are looking at a guy who might not be that much of a contributor being on a minimum contract, but I'm sure we can find somebody, right? Speaking of not much of a contributor, how about Mo Harkless? I mean, it was actually pretty decent the last couple years, and maybe he can return to hitting three-pointers kinda well, and at the very least, he'll be a decent defender. So, yeah, not a whole lot of interesting things in terms of your free agency for the Nets, but they still might be busy this offseason. For the final team of the video, it's one of the biggest disappointments of the NBA, the Philadelphia 76ers, which I'm doing a MyGM right now, so if you haven't watched that, go check it out in the playlist section of my channel. Believe it or not, these guys are even more expensive than the Brooklyn Nets, sitting pretty at $147 million. I'll be honest, this one is really tough, and not because there's a lot of options. This team is insanely expensive, and in a pretty shallow free agency class, there's not a whole lot of options here, but they need any type of shooting. As much as I think they should re-sign Alec Burks, he's probably getting more than the minimum the Sixers gave him last year. But why not get Reggie Jackson in a 76ers jersey? Whether he's getting more than the minimum or not, I don't know. Not a lot of teams need point guards right now, but having another real ball handler and kind of playmaker off of the bench could be really nice for them. Or if he starts, I'm not really sure what they do with him. He's also a pretty decent three-point shooter, so that I think could be pretty good for them. But that's it, really. I know this one was a little shorter, but with the teams who are making like $100 million over the cap, there's not really a whole lot to talk about in terms of free agency. That's more on trades and that kind of thing, especially with such a shallow free agency class. But if you got this far and you did enjoy the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike. And y'all have a good one.